Today's episode of Open Container is presented by Oboes. Many of you already know Oboes, that plucky little brand from Bozeman that stood up in 2007 in a crowded footwear space and said, "There's room for me too." An upstart outlier with a weird name, roomy toe box, and well-built offerings for committed hikers. It's a combination that has attracted a loyal following for 20 years. And we're excited to partner with Oboes because they are committed to shining a light on the core activity to all our outdoor pursuits: hiking. Hiking. The thing we all do, but no one is talking about. We are unified by hiking. Oboes loves hiking. And that's something I can get down with. Over the coming months, we'll be opening the container and getting on the trail with our friends from Bozeman. Oboes. Love hiking. Welcome to Open Container. I'm Doug Schnitzbein. I'm a journalist, writer, and overall lover of the outdoors. I fought wildfires, reported on national politics, published magazines, and I can run a mean chainsaw. On this podcast, we're going to have an open conversation about culture, conservation, policy, business, issues that matter the most to the outdoor community. Let's get some. California's Ventana Wilderness is one of the most powerful places you can explore. To start, the Big Sur Coast itself is one of the wildest spots in the ever more crowded state of California, where so much of the seaside is developed. It refuses to be tamed. The roads often washed out or blocked. The bridges feature on the cover of road atlases. Giant redwoods survive wildfires. And every time you turn the corner, the ecosystem changes. In this place, you go from the crashing waves of the Pacific to Manzanita, to madrone forest, to oak groves, to the presence of those magnificent redwoods, all within the next bend in the trail. It's also a nearly impenetrable place. The trails disappear or are destroyed by landslides, and the deep forest with its thick underbrush filled with poison oak is extremely difficult to navigate if you do go off the path. That's what makes it so appealing to me. It's a place that refuses to be easily explored, mapped, conquered. It's like the mind in that way, deep and always requiring more to access its most important secrets and knowledge. It's also the home of the Tassajara Zen Center, the oldest Japanese Buddhist Zen monastery in the United States. Established in 1967 by famed teacher Suzuki Roshi, the author of one of my favorite books, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Suzuki Roshi's teaching was quite simple. We are all beginners, or at least we can always see things in new ways, work on our disciplines. As he once famously said to his students, all of you are perfect just as you are and need a little improvement. A discipline can be anything from skiing and climbing to meditation, if we approach them every time as if it were the first time, if we enter with curiosity and engage with a mind ready to learn. I enjoy this way of practicing, of being in the world. One of the things I love about skiing is that no matter how good I get at it, no matter how much I learn, no matter how much I improve my form, there's always so much more to experience, an ocean more. Ventana Wilderness is also the site of the best backpacking trip I have ever undertaken. My wife and I were signed up to be working students at the Tassajara Monastery. There's a road that goes from Carmel Valley up to Tassajara, which is the way most people go. But we decided to do it as a 30-mile backpacking trip from Julia Pfeiffer Burns State Park on the Pacific Ocean to the monastery. The trip started out easy enough. We followed the trail to the popular Sykes Hot Springs where we soaked in the waters. But from there it got a little more interesting. The path completely disappeared, and we had to find trailblazes on trees that had been consumed by a wildfire years ago. We had to make our way through poison oak, which luckily doesn't have a huge effect on me. We had to scramble over massive charred redwoods. Somehow we stayed on the path, which seemed very appropriate for a trip to visit a monastery. And the next valley, things got even weirder. The trail had been completely destroyed by a landslide, and we had to follow a path with a makeshift sign on it that said it was the Boy Scout Trail. At points there were what you would call fixed ropes, but they were just laundry line wire to keep you from sliding down into the creek below. Just before we got to the monastery, we slept in an oak forest, and it felt like one of the most peaceful places I've ever been. On this trip, I kept thinking about one of my favorite Zen koans. It goes like this: Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion, has 1,000 arms, and on the palm of each hand of each arm, 1,000 eyes. Which one is the one true I? I think this koan, which is a story designed to make you think outside of the ordinary, could drive logical people crazy. Someone who wants an answer, wants to know which, in fact, is the one true I. Who knows? That's the beauty of it. And if we look at the world around us, if we experience it, compassion is holding us up and viewing us, no matter where we are or where we look, from the most beautiful spots to the most mundane. And likewise, we are looking back at it. We are seeing the world with 1,000 arms and 1,000 eyes here to care for it. I think that's a good way for us as humans to interact with the natural world, as well as the people around us. It's an important reminder, too, in these times when people are filled with such distress. Go outside, see things, and see that the world sees you. That's good medicine for anyone, no matter your beliefs. When we did reach the monastery, it felt as if we were monks wandering in from the dusty desert. We were already at ease, and it was a wonderful week we spent there, working in the kitchen, sitting and meditating, and enjoying the beauty of that place, where the birds come down and eat from your hand, and the fish bump their noses into you when you sit in the river. It almost seems too good to be true. But the magic of the place comes simply from the attitudes of the people who live there, and the respect they have for the world around them, and each other. We could all use a practice like that. We can all easily engage in it. I'm talking about Zen today because my guest, Katie Arnold, is one of the best Zen teachers I know. She is the author of the critically acclaimed memoir, Running Home, published by Random House in 2019. She's a former managing editor at Outside magazine, where she worked on staff for 12 years and created the popular Raising Rippers column about bringing up adventurous children. She's also a passionate ultra runner, and in 2018, she won the Leadville Trail 100. Her new book, Brief Flashings in the Phenomenal World, is a Zen study wrapped in a memoir of destruction and healing, written by an elite ultra runner as she struggles to make it to the other side of a life-shattering injury with her sanity and her marriage intact. So let's open the container with Katie Arnold. I am very excited to have someone I've admired for a long time on the show today, Katie Arnold, who is the author of the new book, Brief Flashings in the Phenomenal World, Zen and the Art of Running Free. Really excited to have you on today, Katie, and great to see you.
Thanks, Doug. I'm super excited to see you and chat with you about the book. And been a big fan of yours too for a while. Thank you.
And we have a whole lot of difficult questions coming up here.
Okay. So. I hope I'm ready.
Obviously, the first, I think something you write about a lot, and you teach. You run camps having to do with this. I think it's a thread that goes through all of your work. And I wanted to ask you, what is flow?
Starting right off with the stumper.
Of course.
Yeah. So flow state is an experience that you have, and you can be doing myriad things, but many people think of it when they are doing athletic pursuits. It's when you become so deeply part of the thing you're doing that your sense of self dissipates, right? And you become the activity you're doing. So the borders between you and your sport, or if you're a rock climber, you and the wall, or a trail runner, kind of you and the trail, dissolve. And so you feel as though you are the thing you're doing. There is a sense of heightened awareness. All your senses become sharper. You might smell or see more clearly. And there's a feeling that you are at once small within this vaster world and also connected to everything. And so flow state really is characterized by a sense of ease, right? It's not that it's easy, but that it's a natural state. And you are challenging yourself, but you are not pushing, if that makes sense. You are kind of moving with the energy of the world. You're not moving from a desire to gain something or to prove something, but it's a total immersion in both the natural world if you're outside, but just in your activity, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And do you think it's something that everyone is capable of experiencing?
Absolutely. Right. So we hear about it most commonly with professional athletes, in pro sports, like we were just talking about, it's often called the zone. And so there's this perception that maybe it's reserved for only the most elite athletes or elite performers among us, musicians, whatnot, artists. But actually, it's a state that I believe that we all have access to, and that we actually are all flow within us, right? Flow is, we're not just trying to reach flow, we're trying to let out our natural flow state. And that's possible in these tiny little glimmers of moments that's where I got the name of my book, Brief Flashings. So there are these brief flashings that hit us where we feel all at once that we are dissolved and part of everything. And there's no, I don't know if in life I have the saying with my girls, my daughters, like either you're sticking or you're clicking, right? And we know that feeling when things are clicking. Things are just sort of lining up. There's serendipity, chance encounters. And when things are sticking, everything feels harder. And so flow state really is, it's a feeling of ease and naturalness, of a sort of natural momentum you have inside of yourself. You're not having to push anything or try, but you are just sort of going along with the natural current of energy in the world.
I love that. Do you think that most people have experienced it in some way?
I
Or do you
think
think most
so.
people have been away from it?
I
Yeah.
think I think most people have probably experienced it. They might not have known what to call it because, again, I think there's this sort of unfair link or bias toward these elite athletes. Like you hear a lot with Michael Jordan and other
Right.
pro athletes where belongs to this rarefied um, group of athletes, and really, I think it's anytime you have that little sort of electric connection to yourself in the world, whether it's your own creativity. I have it a lot as a writer, so not just in my
Of
life as an
course. Yeah.
athlete. Or it might just be when you're walking down the street and you see something that you haven't seen before, and it sparks an idea or it sparks a memory, and it's this feeling of like time dissolving. So, and this is where it gets into kind of the discussion of Zen, where everything's included in this moment, right? There's not these firm, fixed boundaries. We are part of everything all at once, and that's really flow. And so I think people probably have felt it, and again, maybe not known what it was. I was just listening to a podcast today with the Australian writer Charlotte Wood, and she was talking about those little flickering moments. And I was like, oh, the brief flashings, and so they're always there. They're always around us. They're available to us. But the problem is that so many of us move through the world in a distracted state, and no wonder the world has a lot to distract us with right now. But we're distracted by our phones, our to-do lists, and we're not outside as much. We're not, flow really happens in nature. That's one of the
Mhm.
biggest sort of conduits, and we're just disconnected from the sort of physical, tactile world outside. And so, yeah, I think that it's always out there.
I like that. Yeah, I think I've probably felt it most, oddly enough, climbing
Hmm.
or mountaineering at points where I should have been scared and instead felt this kind of sense of peace that sort of
Yeah,
surprised me. And I'm not even sure if I could make myself go into it, but
yeah.
I felt it.
Yeah, I don't think you can make yourself go into it. I mean, I think there are conditions or I call them qualities of being. Um, and I'm writing my third book is really a sort of a field guide to flow state. Um,
Hmm.
and there are qualities of being, right? And so to bet you might call them mindsets. I sort of think of them as qualities of being because mindset implies just the way we think about things, but this is really how we live. And there's basic things like gratitude and being in a state of curiosity and a state of willingness, right, to experience something that you haven't before, or to drop preconceived ideas and see things differently. Obviously preparation is a big part of flow state, right? Like you need to do the work, so to speak, right? So that day that you were on the wall and feeling that flow state, you probably had been practicing the route or climbing a lot. Um, and then another quality is determination. So when things go off the rails, as they all always do, right? Flow is not an absence of difficulty or adversity. It's how we respond to that adversity. And if we sort of resist it or grip against it, that's we just sort of slam into the wall, the anti-flow wall. And so those are the big qualities. So if you kind of come in, did I say humility? That's a big one, right?
Oh, huh.
Realizing that the world and the natural world especially is much older and vaster and stronger and more powerful than we are. And to come in with a certain sense of humility, which I think is what's a lot of what's missing in the outdoor world right now, and has been for a while. Just you can hear it in our language too, when we're like, I'm going to crush the mountain, I bag the peak,
Right.
and actually, like, when we are in flow, we're realizing that our energy is finite as humans, but the mountain's energy is infinite. And so if we let the mountain, carry us up it, we'll get there with a lot less effort and less fatigue. Whereas if we're just trying to dominate the mountain, that's sort of how I've always run.
I like that. I know you like Suzuki Roshi, and it makes me think of Suzuki Roshi quote. I go to practicing yoga or meditation or anything, I think, and it's try to remove anything extraneous from your practice. Ego is something extra.
Yeah.
Get rid of it.
Get rid of ego. And remembering, like, holding on to past performance is something extra, right? And that's something that, that's a harder one to let go of, because it's not like you want to forget completely what you've done, or ignore the success you've had in the past. It's just a matter of holding it lightly, but then going forward into, I'm a huge fan of Suzuki Roshi, but that beginner's mind, right?
Yes,
that everything new starts now. Like, you may be an expert, rock climber or ultra runner, but in each moment you're brand new.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to approach the world too, right? That every time you do something, it's a new experience, right?
And it's like, okay, show me. That's always what I go into. It's like I have this invisible switch in my arm that I think of, and it's the receive switch. And so whenever I go into something new, whether it's a new race or even an interview like we're doing, it's like I imagine, like, flipping that switch into just receive mode, right? It's like, okay, now, like, I'm here to receive. What is this about? And, it might not go the way I want, but I'm receiving nonetheless.
I like that a lot. That actually goes right into something I wanted to ask you, which is, when did the big switch flip for you? When did you, first feel you were kind of living the way you truly wanted to be living, that you were within flow? Has that even happened yet?
Yeah.
Did that happen?
It has happened, right? But flow state is also, I just want to say to people who are listening, like, don't despair. Flow state is not like a permanent state of existence, right? We go in and out of it. And the out parts are just as important, right? The eddies are just as important to the flow of the river. And I use rivers a lot as a big teacher of mine. And that's a lot, a lot of brief flashings in the phenomenal world is centered around rivers and what they can teach us. But, there's slack water in rivers. There's, eddies where you swirl around with, like, all the logs and detritus and, whatever. And then there's when you're flowing, smoothly. And so, what was your question?
When did the big switch flip for you?
So,
when did you really, when did you kind of move into something else?
Yeah. I think that I've always been experiencing that in my life and been fortunate to be aware of it, if not having the exact sort of language for what it was. That came later. But I mean, since I was a very young girl, I started experiencing it with my creativity and with my writing. And I learned very young. My parents divorced. My mother remarried, and we relocated to New Jersey. And things were complicated and different, right? I was part of a new family and new siblings, and it was also the 70s and 80s, and parenting was super different. It was like, if you're home by dinner, that's a win for us, right? Like, as long as you survive. And so I had a lot of time on my own, as kids in that era did. you're sure one of them, especially in the suburbs of New York and New Jersey. You're just
Yep.
free range rather. And so I was outside a lot, and I just found totally by accident that, the first time I really clearly remembered, I was in my backyard. We had a basketball hoop, and I was just doing, what are those called? Like layups. What's the little thing where you hit it and then it goes in every time? And
Layups
layups?
or
Yeah, I mean,
made shots, made shots.
back to professional sports. Wow, see, that's flow right now. We're in flow. I would just do that over and over, and I was not a basketball player. I had no illusions of playing basketball. I didn't even particularly like it, but I loved the repetitive motion and the focus that when my body was doing something physical, the place my mind went, right? It was quieted by the repetitive motion of shooting the basket. And I would just, by accident, find myself making up these elaborate stories in my head. And so that's the first time I really connected sort of physical movement or practice with the creative practice and storytelling through movement. And so I certainly felt it then. And then kind of whenever I would go ride my bike, it was like little sparks, like those little brief flashings would go off. And this is suburban New Jersey. There's nothing glamorous. There's no big wilderness. I always say that because people are like, do you need, epic mountains? You do not need anything like that. You just need, you need an old bike and streets to ride around. And
yes.
So I felt it then, and then I've been, really feeling it on and on. I mean, I've been exploring that my whole life because, again, no one told me this. No one was like, when you go outside and do something, you'll get ideas. And so it was like my little private, personal joy and practice that I did. But I would say really, in my 20s and 30s, once I moved to Santa Fe and was writing and an athlete, I felt that the interconnection between movement and the imagination. And that's really a flow state that's like being reinforced by both sides, right? You're not just trying to sit at your desk and find flow. Like a deep part of my writing practice is movement. And same thing when I'm out. I'm not just out as an athlete, on my watch, like grinding out the miles, like the tempo, the workouts. It's, movement is really serving my writing. So all of that was just building. And then I will say, really, after my accident that I write about in Brief Flashings, I was in this really bad wilderness river accident on the middle fork of the Salmon and broke my leg. And was told I should never run again. And it was in the aftermath of that I really turned to Zen to sort of deepen my understanding of what flow is. Because just another word for flow is presence, right? It's being present in the moment. And so that's when it all came together. And that's when it sort of really seeped into my running and changed the way I ran. I'd always been a different kind of athlete where I never really did workouts or trainings. I would just run for the feeling. Again, I think because a lot of it was the running was serving my writing. And you have to be careful when that's happening, because if you make it too much of a grind or too, where you're too focused on the outcome, you lose that flow state, right? You lose that creative flow. Right. And so I was always walking this very delicate line, like, if I went too deep into sort of, today's training schedule, I would just, it's like drain out all my flow. Like you might as well just pour it out. And so, it was really in the aftermath of that accident and kind of healing and coming back and realizing that if I was going to run again, I would need to run very differently than I had, and I was practicing meditation more and reading a lot more Zen, that sort of everything started to click.
And, did you ever go back and tell the person that told you were never going to run again that you went on to go win Leadville after that?
I did not tell the surgeon. However, I did thank him in my acknowledgments and Brief Flashings. He did an excellent job. He just, he put a story on me that I was not ready to have, to claim as my own. And that was a really important part of the healing, is to realize that, just because someone's in a white coat and telling us how it's going to be does not mean that is so. And we have the power to really take charge of our healing.
And this is kind of, if anyone needs proof that this works, right? You can say, yeah, I mean, if people don't know, you went and, won
Yeah.
probably the hardest, most competitive, one of them, at least ultras there is. So you really put it into action as well.
Yeah, I certainly applied it to Leadville. And I think if there was that sort of like, moment, where it's like the symbols and like, it's the climax of the movie, right? If this were
Right.
If this were a movie, it's where everything comes together. That's certainly the Leadville finish line when I won that race in a historically fast time, and I felt as though I was in flow state the whole time. And I had a plan going in where I was like, okay, I'm just going to try to be in flow as long as I can, because I'd felt that right in my preparation for the race, and I felt how I wanted to feel on race day. But I thought, I'm bound to pop out. It's 100 miles. I'd never run 100 miles before. And it was just like, okay, when I pop out of flow, I'm just going to have to hold on for the rest.
Right.
And, I crossed that finish line, and I'd been in flow the whole way. Which isn't to say it was easy, right? But it
right.
had that fluidity, that effortless feeling, that sense of rightness. I think a better word is naturalness, right? That's a big word in Zen, naturalness. And it felt like, and I think this really is what flow is, like a pure expression of who I really am. And when you're really aligned with kind of sort of who you are in the deepest part of you, and you're doing that is, and there's no gap. Again, that's this Zen idea of no gap between you and what you're doing. That is deep flow state.
I love that. But I think it's also important, right, that you would never tell someone that like you shouldn't meditate or you shouldn't practice flow. You shouldn't practice to get the win, right? To get the job. Like that's not the point of meditation. If you're meditating, someone says like, if you're meditating to get the win as an end result, that's not what you should be doing.
Right. And that's really what I was studying a lot that year when I wasn't sure if I would ever run again or run well or run the same way. And, it's that letting go of the result or the outcome and just being completely present to, again, I'm using this word preparation, right? So preparation for me was not necessarily like preparing to win Leadville, but it was preparing to do my best in each moment. And so you're making preparation, but I never once, and this is completely true, and I write about it in my book, I never once in all the months leading up to Leadville, or when I was healing my leg before I knew I would run Leadville, ever thought I would win Leadville, plan my training around winning Leadville.
Yeah.
Right. And that gives you that total freedom. And that's, the freedom in the title, Zen and the Art of Running Free, that gives you freedom versus if you're clutching really hard to, a result. I want to, run it in this time, or I want to win it. Or, if you're say with meditation, I want to have no thoughts, right? That, to work with the result in mind is to undercut your efforts, right? But rather than just being present and say, I'm going to make my best effort in this moment and see where it takes me. That's again, that receiving mindset of like, okay, I'm open. What, if I make my best true effort, right? Where will it lead me? It won't always lead you to the finish line, but it will always lead you somewhere valuable and good.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So I think that brings us to the big question, the big scary question, right? Which is, what is Zen? And I think, right? And I think a lot of people have misconceptions about it. They'd love to say that, something's so Zen, someone's so Zen, and that makes them think it's just someone who sits there and isn't affected by anything.
Right.
And it's kind of, right? Yes.
Right.
We're making faces here. Yeah.
Yeah, we're all like Zen'd out, or like Zen is like a decor or something. Like
yes,
yeah. And so Zen. And I have a funny scene in the very beginning of the book where I'm going to give a Dharma talk, which is a Zen, a talk that usually starts a meditation period at a Zen center. And I've been invited to give a Dharma talk about running and Zen, or the Zen of running. And at this point, this was 2018, and I've been studying Zen and reading Zen and sort of not really like just studying it with my brain, but absorbing it into my body. And so I have a I've absorbed it and I've run with it and all that. And still, a few weeks before this Dharma talk, and I write about this, I was like, what is Zen? I felt like I needed to have that definition, but Zen by its very, character and definition is often beyond definition. So what I will say is very simply, the way I understand it is Zen is meeting the world as it is in that moment. And so it's facing squarely into the Dharma, which also can be defined or described as the truth of the way things really are. So it's not, it's not seeing the world as we want it or as it used to be or we wish it were, but right now in this moment. And so that's meeting all things as they are. So again, just going back to those misconceptions, it's not always a blissed out state. It's like facing into the fact, I'm really angry right now, and seeing your anger, right? And that may be especially pertinent right now. Like I'm facing into my anger or I'm facing into my pain or my fear. And it's not pushing things away thinking, oh, I need to be this serene person, right? I need to try to get serene. Again, like that's trying to reach an outcome. But finding when you meet the world as it is, exactly as it is, it can bring you some serenity, this feeling of, okay, this is what we've got. Right. And acceptance. And that's not to say it's, I think another misperception is that Zen is very passive, that people just kind of hang out with no ambition and no goals and kind of just watch the world do what it does. And that's not it at all. It's another way I think about it is Zen is making true effort with your, with your spirit in each moment. And so it's being who you really are with great determination every moment. And that's hard work, right? To let go of kind of ego and what we want to happen, to just make true effort in each moment. I think that's actually possibly harder than, moving toward a goal. But when I strongly believe, just from my own experience, and that when you do live that way, you'll oftentimes reach or exceed that goal.
You can still have goals.
You can still have goals, but you're like, okay, so just to use my example of Leadville, like I had the goal. I knew that on August 18th or whatever, I was going to be running this race, and that I really, my only goal really was to try to finish. And so I could hold it out here, but just lightly, like there it is. And then, okay, what's today? Today I'm going to go run 5 miles. Today I'm going to go up the mountain, or today I'm going to walk my daughters to school and spend a lot of time on my feet, right? So it's not that you have your head in the sand or you're unambitious, but it's just that you're very disciplined or about staying in the moment and staying in this moment rather than jumping ahead. Because I think if you just jump ahead to the outcome, you might miss a lot of the detours that are really the path along the way. And B, if you don't reach that specific outcome, you might be really disappointed and not see actually that there were all these more important things that you were meant to learn from it.
My wife Radha, who's practices Buddhism and studies Buddhism and is also a poet, wanted me to ask you this question in particular, which is Zen a physical practice as well as a mental and spiritual practice?
Oh, good
how
question,
is that so? Yeah.
My Zen practice is deeply physical, just like my writing practice is deeply physical, right? We think of writing as just sitting at your desk, typing away, but actually a lot of my writing happens when I'm riding my bike or walking my dogs. It's in my head. It's the movement of ideas.
Yes.
And same thing, I think people think of Zen as this very still, static practice of sitting meditation, which is certainly important. And I have a sitting practice. And just today I ran up the mountain and then I sat for about 10 minutes. And as I was sitting, I was like, oh, I just felt my body like drinking in the stillness and how important that is, right? So you need both. I think that the physical practice of Zen is like, for example, I might start my day with a meditation, but I might read a little first. Like I might read Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, or whatever Zen book I kind of have at hand. And when you read and then you sit with the readings, like some people sit with koans, which are Zen stories of awakening, they kind of go into your body when you sit. But then my extra step is to then go run or move it into my body. So like I'll sit, I'll read the koan and then I'll sit with it 5 or 10 minutes. I don't do like long meditations, sitting meditations, that is. And then when I go run, it's like the movement of my body, or if I'm riding my bike or whatnot, it's kind of jiggling it all through, like the Zen stories. And I'm not consciously trying to solve it with my brain, but my body's working on it, right? My body has a knowing, and our bodies have these knowings that kind of sort of process it while I'm running, so that when I'm moving or riding my bike, I might be more attuned, I might be able to have a different perspective on the story that, hours before I read it and was like, what? Because that's the other thing about Zen. If you just try to understand it analytically, right, it's like, huh? But if you read it with that sense of just letting it wash over you, or thinking of like absorbing it, again, letting go of this idea of a result, like I have to understand this. Then you go running or moving or swimming or whatever it is you do, physical practice, and it just helps your body take it in.
Oh, I like that.
So that's my physical practice of Zen.
All right, folks, let's talk about a game changer, literally. If you're a brand or a retailer in the outdoor industry, think of Endeavor like the ultimate power-up for your sales game. This platform is designed to level up retail associates, giving them the XP they need to master your gear, sell more, and rack up rewards along the way. It's like a cheat code for better sales, making sure your products don't just sit on the shelves but actually move. Why is this valuable? Well, trained and motivated staff sell way more gear. Brands using Endeavor, like K2 Sports and Smith Optics, have seen better sell-through, stronger brand engagement, and real data insights on what works. And here's where Endeavor gets really interesting. It's gamified. That means learning about products and earning incentives feels fun and not like homework. But there's also a couple of other power-ups you'll want to consider. First is their partnership with Locally, so online shoppers can instantly find a knowledgeable staffer in a nearby store ready to seal the deal. Second is an option known as Freemium, where you can launch brand assets, push newsfeed posts, and coordinate rep clinics. And with Endeavor's pay-as-you-go plans, you can take sales contests, education campaigns, or collect staff insights collection programs all out for a test drive. The bottom line, if your retail game is feeling like it's stuck in easy mode, Endeavor is the upgrade you need to unlock next-level sales, max out your team's knowledge, and beat the boss when it comes to customer experience. Head to Endeavor, that's ENDVR.io, to learn more today.
Let's take a moment now to talk about the book, right? Your latest book, Brief Flashings of the Phenomenal World, Zen and the Art of Running Free. What does that mean? How would you describe that to someone? What is the phenomenal world? I think you've talked a little bit about the flashings, but what is...
So the phenomenal world is the tactile world that we're the physical world before us, right? And it's our, it's the trees outside, it's the wind blowing, it's this world that we're living in right now. And so these brief flashings kind of crack us open to this world of phenomena. So wind, sun, sky, relationships. It's the world we inhabit. And again, as we were saying earlier, like these flashings are always happening. And we just kind of need to train ourselves or just open ourselves to start seeing them. And that's really kind of what, when I was thinking about this book, I was like, it's definitely told through this river accident and kind of a return to running. But it's much more than that. It's about a way of living more awake and more just fully inhabiting your life every day, and seeing the flashings. And you don't have to be a writer or an artist or an athlete to see them or to benefit from them. It's that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm part of something. I'm here. Do you know that we sometimes forget we're alive, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm alive. I'm in this world. And, don't squander it.
So what was your impetus for writing this particular book? What was the story you wanted to tell? And most of all, who do you really want to reach with it? Who do you want to read this book and be affected by it?
Oh gosh, I just, the impetus really was that river accident that I've talked about. That was the summer of 2016. And my husband and I have spent a ton of time on whitewater rivers. We've taken our daughters on into the wilderness since they were babies, literally. Rivers are very much like our family's special place. And we'd always wanted to go in the Middle Fork. Our girls were very young. And so, of course, we didn't bring them. It was, too high consequence. And we're though some people might laugh at this, we're really conservative with our kids on rivers. And so we left them home.
I'm not laughing. Yeah. That's smart. That's smart.
But some people will be like, you took a baby down the San Juan. That's not conservative. Right. And so we left our kids behind, and this was a private trip. So we were rowing our own boat, and my husband was on the oars, and he has a ton of experience. And we just had a fluke accident where we rapped on a rock and got pinned. And then eventually the raft flipped, and I went in the water. And as soon as I landed in the water, I knew that I'd seriously hurt my leg. But then we had to make this decision as a group, whether or not we stay on the river or try to get me off. And it was the first day, right? It was the first 30 minutes of the trip. And so people are like, why don't you bash your way upstream on the, in the banks and get out? And that's such a there's so many different answers for that, right? It's a deeply complex question that I've asked myself many times. But I think ultimately I just wanted to stay with my husband, and he had to stay with our boat. We had no way else to get it down. And so I stayed on the river, and I stayed on the river for 6 days. With what turned out, I didn't know my leg was broken, but it turned out that I shattered my tibial plateau, which is right below the knee. And so that experience of having to stay on the river and be in the state of like a deeply concentrated state where there's 100 rapids in 100 miles on that river. And I think we flipped on at mile 3. Right. So we had 97 more miles and 97 rapids. And the one we flipped on wasn't even named. And so that itself was a Zen practice, right? There was so much to worry about downstream, like all the rapids. I couldn't fall out of the raft again. I knew that, how are we going to get down? I was in a lot of pain and afraid. And so I had to just focus on the exact rapid we were on. Right. And that became this great teacher of, there's so much to worry about, but just, be on the rapid you're on. And so when I got home and went to the doctor and was shocked to find out I'd broken my leg and needed surgery and would be, I was like, I knew I have a high pain threshold, but this was ridiculous even for me. And, and to realize I was be on crutches for 14 weeks and, he was like, you should never run again. That I knew, as a journalist, I've been a journalist for 30 years, that's a good story, even though it's not the story I wanted to tell for myself. I didn't want that story. And so that very, dramatic, it was a real shift in our marriage. It sort of became this fault line in our marriage. And the book talks a lot about marriage, especially among two adventurous people, and having sort of that adventurous marriage. What does that mean with risk and when someone gets hurt? And so it was just this huge, fault line. I think of it like the movie Superman, that scene when Lois Lane's car falls into the San Andreas fault. And it's molten underneath. You can literally see the magma bubbling up, and Superman. So that's what it felt like. Our marriage and our relationship had just been going along, and all of a sudden this fault line opened up that we did not know was there. And so it was, the story is about Zen and running, but it's really about marriage and love. And, I joke, the, publisher loves to put on a subtitle. And Zen and the Art of Running Free is exactly right. But I joke that it could also be like Zen and the Art of Staying Married, because that was really tested. But spoiler alert, things are good. We're fine. But not without. We had a lot. It was just I had to heal my leg, and I had to heal our, how we were together in our marriage. And yeah, it was a lot.
There's this quote I really love at the beginning of the book when you say, the mind, like time, isn't linear. It jumps from now to then and back again. It bends and braids like a river, rising and falling like the shape of mountains in the space of a breath. I think that's just beautiful.
No, thanks.
It also seems very true to me when it comes to the way we tell our own stories, right? Especially in regards to outdoor experiences.
Yeah.
So how is your story not linear, and how have you learned to tell it in some way that is?
There's a chapter in the book called Stories, which I really love because it is sort of acknowledges that head on. Like, as a writer, I've always kept notebooks, and I fill like one a month with whatever I'm thinking about, or, like it's like a journal. But I have notebooks from the last probably 15 years. And I kept one on the river that week that we were in Idaho. And it's interesting because your mind, when I was set out to write the story of what was happening in Idaho, I found that even in the moment, I could not write it linearly, right? I was like, I was in an accident today. And then my mind, that was too much for my mind to handle. And so I jumped back to something, that had happened 3 weeks earlier. And so I could see it, when I went back, when I first started writing Brief Flashings, I found that notebook, it was the red one with the dirt smudges, the mud smudges on it. And I saw that the story jumped forward and back weeks and weeks at a time because it was too painful to tell it all in a straight line. And I think that's really true for our lives and the way our minds work. We might sit down and think we're writing about, I don't know, whatever. And we'll find ourselves writing about our grandmother's hands, our memories that come up. And that's really how I write. It's kind of this, I don't know, I think of it as like wild writing, or like just letting yourself go into the memory that's presenting itself, and following all leads, right? And that is a flow state for me, versus coming in. It's just like with a sport. If you come in and you're like, I'm going to boss this around, I'm going to run, 6-minute miles for 5 miles. I mean, I think that's great, and that works. But you're also closed off, right, to other stories or experiences, rather than, when you sit down, you're like, okay, I'm going to see where this takes me. Which is not to say that later you don't want to edit, right? You do, but I never want to edit or control it so much that the story dies.
Yeah.
It has to stay a little wild.
I think about your first book, Running Home. You deal with the death of your dad to cancer.
Mm-hmm.
I recently lost my dad to cancer.
So sorry.
Yeah, but I think when we think about, loss and that kind of grief, and especially the really powerful losses in our lives, make us kind of rethink the way time works. Even, right? What is, linear time is almost impossible to deal with because we're all gone, right? But in this way, we continue to relive in these experiences as they go around.
Yeah, and I think that was something that I first learned after my father died. And as you're experiencing, right, there's not, like, people say, oh, like the first year, like there's this timeline of grief, but it's not like that at all. It's very much like 2 steps up, 1 step back, sideways, diagonally. And that's kind of the beauty of it, because that's how the person that we've loved and lost stays with us. And it's such a gift when those little flashes come to us. Or through our dreams, or just a memory we had. And so I learned that then. And then just knowing about Zen and reading and kind of moving with Zen mind, it's, there's this idea in Zen that all moments are included in this moment. And that comes from the 12th century Japanese Zen master Dogen and his essay called Uji, or Time, and where everything that has ever been or will ever be is right now. And when I read that, I totally didn't understand it. It was one of those mornings I was sitting meditation outside. I read it and I was like, whatever. And then I went for a long run up on the mountain, and I just ran my way into understanding. And I just remember I saw a man on the trail. He had a dog. And then we passed each other. And like 15 minutes later, I was like, the man is still in this moment with me. And then extrapolating that, I was like, and my dad, who'd been dead for 10 years, was in that moment. And so it was just this fullness of understanding that I didn't understand with my brain. It was in my body. And that's why I love like the tagline on this book is read this book with your body. Right.
There you
So
go.
read this with your body, not with that mind that's like, what the hell is Zen? Or,
Yeah.
Or like people, I think another misperception, just to go back to that, is that it's a religion, that like it's telling you like a dogma or doctrine. And it's not, it's just really like a way of living.
Well, there is one, I'd like to talk to you since I have you on here, someone who also enjoys Zen. There's one of my favorite Zen koans that I want to kind of talk with you about and see what your interpretation is of it. And it goes like this. It's Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion, has 1,000 arms, each with an eye on the palm. Which is the one true eye?
Oh my gosh. I've not heard of that one. Which is the one? So he's got 1,000 arms with 1,000 eyes. Oh my gosh. I'm going to have to sit with that one. What do you think? What do you think? Have you been reading it a lot or studying, working with it?
Yeah. And I think one of the interpretations, and I think this goes to some of your idea of Zen too, is it's right. There is no one true eye, right? Is the simplest way to say it, right? That compassion, that compassion from the world is all around us everywhere, right?
Right.
And especially we feel that in nature.
Yeah, we are all the eye too.
Oh, I like that.
That's the way I would think of it too, is that, there's not one true eye, and yet we are an eye. I don't know. That's a beautiful one.
I like that.
The one I really love too, that I think about all the time, is that, and I can't remember, it was two monks talking, and I can't remember which ones right now. And one monk asked the other, what was your original face before even your parents were born?
Oh, wow.
And I love that, because it's asking like, what is your essence? Like, what was your original face? And what is your original face before they were born? So like, who is your deepest self? And I feel my original face when I'm in the mountains.
And that's just what I was going to ask you. I mean, I guess it's not necessary to be outside or be in the wild or nature to study Zen, right? But somehow it's more powerful, or you can access it easier out there, right?
I think it's a great teacher, right? Because it's so much bigger than just, our small selves, and being in nature. Yeah, we see teachers everywhere, lessons, metaphors. I was just on this flow camp that I led in the desert, and we found on one of our runs, this was down in Big Bend, what's called a decoy nest. So it's this nest built inside a cholla. And so it's really prickly, and the nest is fake, right? These birds who built it, I'm spacing on what they were right now. I should have brushed up on this. The birds that built it built a decoy, because their true nest was somewhere else. And like the effort required to build a fake nest to protect their young. And it just, there's so many lessons there, because it's also like, what are our own decoy nests? Like, where are we hiding things? And, like, where's our truest self, and what are we presenting to the world, and what are we hiding? And, so I think nature just has all of that all the time. And, again, it doesn't take anything special. You don't have to run. You don't have to run fast. You can walk. On another flow camp I lead in Colorado, we go out and we have a conversation with a tree. Sounds so hokey when I say it, but actually, like, there's the science when you put your forehead or the top of your head against, there's some nerve up there. Like, is it your vagus nerve or something? It goes against the bark of the tree. And I had this, just really illuminating, beautiful conversation with the tree. And now I sound nuts. But
no, I don't think so. I bet trees probably have better conversations than most people I know. So,
I mean, the tree talked back, and I wrote it down. It's going in my next book.
I love that. That'll be something to read.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we're getting near the end of our time. And I wanted to ask you the one question I ask everyone at the end of this show, and that is, what gives you hope?
Oh, what gives me hope? Nature. Being outside in wild places and feeling small in the wild, and just seeing that things are so much older and more powerful than we are, and practicing that feeling of humility that we feel in nature, that really is a wonderful gift when we are in a humble place. And it's something like a muscle I think we all need to practice. But yeah, just being in nature gives me hope. I mean, and nature, it's hard because there's so much, right? It's at risk.
Yeah.
But I still find that I'm my truest self outside, and it's where I can disconnect and just feel part of something much bigger than myself. And that's really freeing.
I love that. And I think I'm going to keep thinking about that idea of the face before you were born and how you
Yes.
does it out there, huh?
How,
That's a beautiful
yeah.
thought.
What is your original face before even your parents were born? And I love that, even them before, and you could even extrapolate before even their parents were born. That sense of that sort of deepest, truest self.
And we feel that out there.
Yeah, right. You feel that. And even though, we're changing all the time, right? That's such a big idea in Zen, is impermanence, right? We can't hold on to anything. And, we're not the same bodies we were, 15 or 20 years ago. But when I'm out there, just yesterday we hiked down to the Rio Grande, and it was like, I just felt like I've always felt. I felt like I could have been 7 or 14 or 25.
Yes. Yes.
And that gives me hope, that there's so much work to do, and so many stories to tell. And, that's my deepest passion, is to tell those stories.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you,
And when it
Doug.
comes to telling stories, can you let people know the best way to find your newest book, the
Yes.
best way to follow you, and the best way to contact you for your camps?
Yes, great. So the best way to learn about me and my camps, and you can find my book there, is on my website, which is just katiearnold.net. I have all the information about upcoming flow camps. And those are really special because I've worked for 30 years as a journalist and a travel writer. So I'm like, part of that, my passion for travel, is to find these really special places where we can be most connected to ourselves and our imagination and the natural world. So I sort of am constantly on the lookout for those really special, real places. So you can find out about Flow Camp there, buy copies of Brief Flashings in the Phenomenal World, or my first book, Running Home. There, of course, they're for sale on online as well. Bookshop.org helps you support your favorite local bookshop. There's other places too. It was just released on audio. So if you love to listen to audiobooks when you're outside or doing chores or commuting, you can find that on Audible as well. And I'm on Instagram. I'm really most active there, and it's just at Katie Arnold. And I'm also on Substack, where I publish weekly a newsletter called Work in Process, which is looking at the process behind all the creative work we do. And that includes running and adventure, and being outside is a form of creativity. So subscribe there. You can subscribe for free or for a small cost that supports working human artists like me and Doug.
Katie Arnold, thank you so much. I can't wait until the next time I get
Thanks,
the chance
Doug.
to talk to you.
This is a real honor. Thank you so much.
Thanks for imbibing Open Container, a production of Rockfight LLC. You can pre-order Brief Flashings in the Phenomenal World at bookshop.org. Learn more about Katie Arnold and her flow camps at katiearnold.net. Please take a second to follow our show on whatever podcast app you're listening to us on, and send your emails and feedback to myrockfight@gmail.com. Our producers today were David Karstad and Colin True. Art direction provided by Sarah Gensert. I'm Doug Schnitzbahn. Get some. Thanks for listening.